All right, back with another Power Rankings tier list post week 11 edition. We are getting down to it. Season goes by so quickly. Let's talk about, you see four teams are already on the board. Those are, two of those teams had a bye week this week. The other two play tonight. Let's talk about the 28 teams and where I have them ranked. I started doing this last week. I thought it was interesting enough, so we'll do it again this week. We're going in reverse order from where they ended up last week, simply just in terms of tier rankings. They're not individually ranked, but yeah, you get the idea. Titans, hey, a competitive game. Signs of life from Cam Ward. In this one for sure, you had a solid defensive performance against, admittedly, a bad offense who has their backup quarterback in, but that bad offense with their backup quarterback scored 26 points in the fourth quarter against the Jaguars. 6 of those were special teams points, or defensive points, excuse me. But still, it was a solid game from them. But again, it's still, they're a bad team. They just are. Their worst record in the league. Could end up that way. Could be looking at back-to-back first overall picks, depending on how things break down. They were the worst team in football last year, and I think they're worse this year, which is not ideal. The New York Giants are next on the list with Jameis Winston. I don't know. Can we bump them up to Scrappy? Why not? Why not? They looked fun in this first game with Jameis Winston out there. I do think this offense has kind of kept them in games and looked solid despite really not having a lot there, whether it's Jackson Dart or Jameis Winston. So maybe give credit to the coaching staff, maybe just give credit to those two quarterbacks, give credit to the line, whatever you want to give credit to. It's still not great, but staying in a game against Green Bay will keep them in the Scrappy tier. You then have the Cleveland Browns who, we'll see if it's Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders. That still hasn't been announced what's going to happen. Either way, it's not great. There just isn't a lot offensively. They were in that game against Baltimore, which is why I had them in the Scrappy tier earlier, because teams are just going to feel like they should win against the Browns easily, and it's not going to happen a lot of these weeks. So I had them in bad last week. We'll bump them up to Scrappy as well. Why not? Washington is next on the list. They lose a game, a competitive game, granted against not a very good Dolphins team in Madrid. I'm going to keep them in the bad tier, even with the defense playing better this week. It's not been good this season. The Dolphins offense has been up and down. I'm not expecting that to happen. And when their offense is just okay with your backup quarterback in, that's kind of where they're at. The Jets, and I don't know, lose to the New England Patriots in kind of dominating fashion. They were in that game for like a half of football or so, but once the second half came around, New England was able to pull away, which was expected. I mean, it's a good team against a bad team. We'll put them in the bad tier. So now we are at the teams. We have passed the teams that were in the bad tier last week. We are now moving on. Only two teams that were in the Scrappy tier last week we have to talk about. The Saints also were, but they didn't play, so not talking about them. The Cincinnati Bengals, and again, sometimes the difference between Scrappy and bad is just kind of vibes. It feels like with these teams more than anything else. Who's still fighting at this point? And I do think that Cincinnati is still fighting. Their defense is very bad. It is. And with this, Joe Flacco on the right week can have some solid games. So I'll keep him in Scrappy, but definitely considering dropping them down to bad. And the Cardinals, I still think, are Scrappy. They have some offensive firepower. Trey McBride, I keep talking about, he's having an unreal season. Unfortunately, it's for not a very good football team right now. It feels like the Cardinals aren't atrocious at any specific thing. They're just not really good at anything, which is kind of why they're in the Scrappy tier. So, yeah. The Minnesota Vikings, who, J.J. McCarthy continues to have this incredibly up and down stretch. He is doing some things that you like, but in this game he was not. Until that final drive where he did put together a nice drive and make some good throws. But he was constantly missing throws. When he did hit guys, they dropped it. There were a lot of drops in that game as well. It just, quite frankly, was an awful offensive performance. And if Kevin O'Connell, I think, coached a fine game. It wasn't like no one could get open. So that was tough. I had them into what are you tier last week. We are in the what are you tier teams, and I'm trying to see if I should bump them down. I'm going to keep them here for just another week. They did still almost win that game. Their defense has looked better. It really has, but again, we need to see some more signs of life from from McCarthy if we're going to bump them up at all. The Miami Dolphins, who I actually bumped up to what are you last week, and I mean I guess they won. So do I just keep them in? I guess I'll keep them here. They have had some solid performances. Their defense has looked a little better. Still don't know if they're a great team, but they're probably going to continue to win games with their schedule. Although, again, Miami hasn't shown that they can definitely beat a bad team, but that's where they're at. The Falcons and Panthers are the last two that were in the what are you tier, and they played each other in overtime, so I guess that makes sense if I consider them a similar tier. And I'm going to keep them in the what are you tier. I still think they're a horrible team, and it feels like they're very much in these games, but ultimately, it doesn't matter if you're into games if you end up on the wrong side of them consistently. I think that there is some coaching issues here with this team. They've now, actually, now I'm thinking about it, now that they've had the injuries, Michael Penix, Drake London both banged up, I think I will drop them down to Scrappy, partially just due to the injuries, but also, I mean, they're not a great team, and they just let Bryce Young, who has, a good performance is when he gets 200 yards, they let him get over 400 in this game. That transitions to the Panthers, who beat the Falcons, and yeah, we'll bump them up a tier to solid. Their defense has played solidly well this season, not like overwhelmed. It's not Houston's, it's not Denver's, but it's played well this season. Didn't have its best game against Atlanta, but really did kind of slam the door shut after that. The not great first half. Part of that was Kirk Cousins coming in, but it wasn't all that. They were able to have a really good Bryce Young performance. And again, if you can get some of those, if you can get signs of life from this passing attack, this is a good football team. Like this, that would bump them up tiers if they get consistency from the passing game, because they've had a good rushing game this season. They've had a good defense this season. They just haven't had a passing game. They did against Atlanta and put in one of their better performances of the season. So yeah, I'll put them up to solid. The San Francisco 49ers, who continue to find ways to win games despite these injuries. I mean, they put up over 40 with Brock Purdy back in the lineup, and I do think Purdy makes this team better. I'm going to put them in the feels like playoffs tier as of right now. They were in solid last week. Let's bump them up. I think that's fair. The Texans, I had in solid. I'm going to keep in solid. They do get a win. Not an overly impressive win against Tennessee, but a win is a win, and they needed that. They're now 5-5. Their defense is so good. You could argue it's the best defense in football. They're just not getting enough out of their offense right now. Part of that is the backup quarterback, and they did look better right before Stroud got hurt. So if he comes back and starts looking good again, like they have fixed some issues with the offense that are outside of Stroud. You get him back, maybe it can be better. They have a tough stretch coming up, but yeah, they're in it at 5-5. And then the Chicago Bears, who, kind of said on the podcast, they continue to keep winning in the least convincing ways, but they continue to keep winning, right? I had them in solid. I'm going to keep them in solid. I still think this is a solid football team. I think they do some things well. They've been incredibly inconsistent this year. But, and again, the record is the record, but ultimately when they play better teams, I don't know if I'm fully banking on them being able to beat those teams. Either way, a massive win for the Chicago Bears. The way this season has gone, first in the division, I don't think that'll continue, but the fact that it might is amazing. And if they can get into a playoff spot, what a turnaround. Ben Johnson maybe should be in the coach of the year conversation, maybe, right? I don't think he should win it, but I feel like usually the guys that turn a team around get in that conversation. I mean, and it's weird because it hasn't just been his great X's and O's like we expected. It's been a lot of getting the team to believe and things like that, which is, the actual coaching part of it, which is kind of interesting. So, yeah. Next up is the Jacksonville Jaguars, another team that was in the solid tier as of last week. In a team that, I think that it's reasonable to say, had possibly the worst loss of the season out of any team last week when they blew that game. So to come back and go up against the Chargers, not a bad team, and really take it to them is really impressive for this Jaguars team. I still, again, I feel like they're not getting enough out of their passing game right now. I'm still going to keep them in the solid tier, but I'm considering bumping them up for sure. And I think if they can keep this kind of thing going, I certainly will. Feels like playoffs again. Doesn't mean I'm like they're definitely making the playoffs. It just means they feel like a playoff team. I don't know if I'm quite there yet with Jacksonville, but they are close. Like this was an impressive win and makes me think about it. I think if they hadn't had those disappointing losses in the schedule, I probably would bump them up, like because they've had impressive wins. But yeah, that's where I have them. The Pittsburgh Steelers, who, again, continue to have this up and down stretch similar to Jacksonville, where it's like their best games absolutely are, one of the top 3 tiers. But I've been burned by the Steelers too much over my time doing this, where every time you buy in, they do something stupid. So, and also with Aaron Rodgers banged up, I don't know how much I want to factor that in. I guess with no Aaron Rodgers, they're probably like a what are you? With Aaron Rodgers, there probably feels like playoffs. So we'll just keep them at solid for now, and that feels fair. You then have the Denver Broncos, who I have been lower on this season. I just have because. And listen, I'm sure Broncos fans say, "Oh, you hate my team," because every fan base thinks I hate their team. But I mean, the main reason I've been doing it is, like, I value the passing game a lot, and you need to have a consistent passing game if you're going to go on a deep run in the playoffs. So I had them in feels like playoffs. These are the teams that I had in feels like playoffs. Their passing game was good against, like, Kansas City, and Bo Nix maybe had his best performance of the season. I really liked what he did, especially down the stretch. The question is not, should they be up above feels like playoffs? That's done. Clearly, this is a really good defense. They still don't get a ton offensively in the running game or the passing game. So because of that, I am going to keep them in dark horse. And I know some Broncos fans might say, look at our record. I don't just look at records. I try to look at how the teams are currently playing. And for Bo Nix, it's just, he played very well against Kansas City. I do want to see more consistent full games out of not just him, the entire offense. They pass protect very well. They're getting some stuff receiving wise. I think they could bump up to the top tier. I totally think that's possible. For now, though, I am just going to keep them one tier lower. The Chargers, who I had in feels like playoffs. I don't think I can do that. I can't. They're back to solid. The Chargers have been a team that has moved maybe the most in this in this season. It feels. I mean, they were at one point Super Bowl contenders. They on my tier. I don't know. I mean, the tackles thing is an issue. Losing your tackles though, like, okay, that should hurt. We saw Tampa Bay without their tackles, and like they didn't go from awesome to awful. Like they went from like awesome to like, this isn't great. Like, you should be able to get some semblance. And I get it. They're based around their ground games that are a different team. And it is what it is, right? Like, sometimes these things happen going up against good pass rush. But, like, it just feels like there are games with Justin Herbert. He's weird because I think the Herbert haters are weird when it comes to that stuff. But it's also, like, it does feel like him more so than any other of the, like, top 10 quarterbacks in football. I guess maybe sometimes Hurts can get in this. Sometimes Goff can get in this a little bit. Maybe Baker Mayfield every now and then, where it's like, can you just complete a pass? Can you just get something going? Herbert's usually so good for like 15, 16 games a season. Then he'll have one or two where it's just like, what's going on here? So I don't know. Herbert's not the problem. If Herbert has a bad game in the playoffs, whatever, you lose. You don't bank on that. The defense usually is playing well. Had a horrible game. It was a bad game against Jacksonville. They still can clean things up, but it just feels like when it's bad, it's awful for them. The Baltimore Ravens, who, another win against the Browns. I had in feels like playoffs. I think I'm going to keep them there for now. The off passing attack wasn't great against Cleveland. Cleveland's such a good pass defense. Myles Garrett had 4 sacks in that game. Cleveland's kind of the team that they're the definition of scrappy, really, and I'm glad I kept them in that tier because like it does feel like they'll drag you into the mud, and even if you win, you don't look good when you're done with it. And I think that's kind of how Baltimore has to feel. Their defense looking better though. I know it was just against Cleveland, and Cleveland has an awful offense, but the Baltimore defense starting to show signs of life. And again, with how bad it was to start the season, if it could just be solid, that changes a lot. So. We'll keep them there. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, again, they're staying competitive against good teams. I had them in feels like playoffs. I can't bump them below feels like playoffs. But like, yeah, I mean, it's just they're beating bad teams they're beating bad teams and mediocre teams, losing to great teams. Feel like a playoff team. Can't really say they're more than that right now. The Kansas City Chiefs, who I had in the dark horse, so now we are in the dark horse teams, 3 teams that might not stay in there. We will talk about it. So what do I do? What do I do with the Chiefs? They're a weird team. They're currently 6th highest odds to make the playoffs, and yet they are currently, 6th highest odds to win the Super Bowl, not make the playoffs. And yet currently, if the season ended today, they would not be in a playoff spot, and there's no way for next week them to be in a playoff spot. There's no way for them into just a 1-game stretch get into a postseason spot because they're a game behind Jacksonville. Jacksonville beat Kansas City, and this is why, I think a lot of people like to say, like, oh, it's just 1 game. Like, who cares? All that matters for the Chiefs is, once they get into the postseason, what matters about seeding? Well, these games matter, right? This isn't basketball where games don't really matter. This is the NFL, and if you put yourself behind the 8 ball, well, now you're going to have to really fight to win these games. You're going to have to play more physical than you'd like, more desperate than you'd like, and you might lose some of these. And if you lose a couple of these games you shouldn't lose, they are, they're in trouble. All that being said, when I watch this team play, they look like a playoff team to me. As in, again, it feels like playoffs. It's not, I think you're going to make the playoffs. They feel like a playoff caliber team. But that is still the worst statement you can make for the Kansas City Chiefs, given what they've done these past handful of years. And if they're just a playoff team, well, now that you're behind the 8 ball, you might not make it. So it's where I'm having them. Yes, part of it is history. I think it's fine to factor in the fact that Patrick Mahomes has, won 3 Super Bowls. Like, that's going to be a factor in my rankings, but that's where I have them right now. The Green Bay Packers they're an interesting situation as well. So last time I had them in the dark horse, but that was before they had their worst loss of the season, at least in terms of like publicity, really laying an egg against Philadelphia offensively. Their defense played well. They actually were in that game. I'm not overly concerned about that. And again, they beat the Giants. They're not looking overly impressive. I think there was a group of people that said, are the Packers, like, should they be considered Super Bowl favorites? Or are they, like, very much in that camp? I kind of wasn't in that camp. I thought this was, like, a good team, a team that could make the playoffs, but I didn't fully see them as that. But, I think this season, like, especially early on, it's like, okay, I was probably wrong. And then they've had this up and down stretch where, we talk about Chicago winning games but not really looking impressive while they do so. Well, outside of weeks 1 and 2, and week 2 against Washington looks a lot less impressive now. So really outside of week 1, they haven't done that either. That game was very close against, admittedly, a scrappy Giants team, but still, I had them in the dark horse tier. I think I'm just going to drop them down to feels like playoffs for now. I think that they could get better. And here's the one thing I will say. Jordan Love played great once he came back in from injury in that game against the Giants. And Jordan Love has not been the issue. People are pointing the finger at Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur. I get it. The bad games have been there. But this season, those guys have both been good. This is a team that they could win the Super Bowl, but they have to start playing a little bit better if they're going to do that. We need more of second half Jordan Love, and the defense is playing well. That's what you need. And catch the football sometimes, defense. Come on. Take advantage of some of these mistakes. The Buffalo Bills, I had in the dark horse tier. So these were the 3 teams in the dark horse tier last week were the Packers, Chiefs, and Bills. Do I keep them here or do I bump them up? There are still issues with this Bills team. I think the receiving corps played a lot better against Tampa Bay. What do we expect from them? I think that they don't stop the run particularly well. So because of that, I think I'm just going to be harsh and keep them in the dark horse tier right now. I think that they're close. I mean, here's the thing is like, they have easily the best quarterback that is in these top 2 tiers. And that puts them maybe in that puts them as Super Bowl contenders. I think that's just it. Josh Allen. Like, as much as we could say their run defense isn't great, yeah, they're legit contenders when you have Josh Allen, and you're still close enough with everything else. Even if there are issues. So the Los Angeles Rams. So now we are in the Super Bowl contenders tier. And I can't remember when we just had last time we've had just so many teams in the Super Bowl contenders tier. I might even make a tier after this and bump a couple teams up. But let's go with the Rams. right here. Yeah, let's do that. I'm gonna do a Super Bowl favorites. Yeah, let's do this Super Bowl favorites, and let's put the Rams in the mix. And poor Bills fans, they get to feel like, hey, we got bumped up at the top tier, only for me to then create a tier higher than them. But they're still right there. I do think the Rams, though, as of right now, I mean, I don't know. They've just been so impressive, even in a game where they can't get a ton going passing wise, just due to Seattle has a really good pass defense. They're still able to have this really good performance here by their overall team. Their defense is so good. Now, the one thing you have to say is, okay, are they going to get 4 turnovers the next time they play Seattle? Maybe, because Sam Darnold kind of struggles against the Rams, and that's kind of the one good thing is like, the biggest threat right now, maybe to you, period, is like the Sam Darnold Seahawks, and you seemingly have his kryptonite. So because of that, yeah, they're in my opinion, in the NFC favorites to get to the Super Bowl. We then have the Philadelphia Eagles, who, listen, the offensive issues are there, and so I don't know. Is it? I'm honestly considering dropping them down a tier because of just these offensive issues. They now had some offensive line injury issues. Their defense is great, but I don't know. I'm debating it because I'm like looking at Denver and I'm like, well, say something about Denver you can't say about Philadelphia. Like all my issues about Denver, I do think the difference is Philadelphia, we have seen it before. We have seen A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith play awesome in the passing attack in a way that we haven't seen of Denver. So I'm going to keep them in the Super Bowl contenders tier. But yeah, they are very close to being dropped down a tier. New England will be my other Super Bowl favorites. They're my AFC Super Bowl favorites. Right now, I just think that I know the schedule is the schedule. They've looked so impressive, though. They really have. Drake May is probably the MVP frontrunner at this point. It's him or Stafford. And I think that those two teams could be playing each other in a Super Bowl. Who knows? We could have the third, will the third time be the charm for the Rams, which would be interesting because that would be, 3 different quarterbacks for the Rams if they can get to the Super Bowl against the Patriots. Obviously, they lost with Kurt Warner back in the day, then Jared Goff, a handful of years back. First Super Bowl I covered on this channel. So, yeah. I was so bad at YouTube back then. The Super Bowl happened. I didn't even make a video for like 3 days about the Super Bowl. I just posted other stuff before posting about the Super Bowl. I don't know how I managed to make this work, but eventually I figured it out. Seattle, really impressive loss. It really was. I mean, I know that they turned the ball over 4 times. Or Sam Darnold, there's 4 interceptions. They still, it comes down to a missed field goal. If they had 10 extra seconds, maybe they win this game. I mean, that's how close of a game this was. So, really impressive stuff here by Seattle. Honestly, if they have like an extra like 4 or 5 seconds, that might have been enough because they could have gone for a longer passing play in that situation. Granted, like you don't want to turn the ball over that much, and like that is a thing where we always kind of talk about turnovers as well. That's fluky, but like it is becoming a trend with Darnold against this Rams team. He doesn't play great against them. I think it's partially that when he's in trouble, like his play does seem to go down more than your average quarterback's play goes down. So because of that, that's an issue, but everything else about this team is great. And again, Darnold's been good this season. Let's not overreact to one bad game. They are real contenders here. Then we have the Detroit Lions, who I'm going to put in the dark horse tier. I had them in Super Bowl contenders. Can't do that after their loss against the Eagles. Offense has still been good this season, but has had these games where it's taking a slight step back. Is it the Ben Johnson thing? Is it the, injuries to the offensive line and just the offensive line losing, their entire interior in the offseason? I think those two things have made maybe slight impacts. I think we were expecting it either to like be no issue whatsoever or like a massive issue, and maybe it's just been kind of slight impacts, which have, the offense has still been good this season, one of the best offenses in the league, but I believe it was the best offense in the league last year. So even with their defense being healthier, still not fully healthy, but no defense is fully healthy, being healthier, it's just, I think that this is a team that can still win the Super Bowl, but I'm going to keep them in dark horse because they do still have a really good offense and their defense is solid, but for now, that's where I have the Detroit Lions. So, yeah, that is my tier rankings. It's an interesting list and interesting. What a season this has been. How up in the air with, Baltimore, Kansas City, both of them being in just the feels like playoffs tier. Buffalo not being a Super Bowl favorite in the AFC or even in their division. I mean, it's been a crazy stretch right now. We'll see how it finishes. But yeah, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.